Basically, the answer is like, just don't do it or don't do it till marriage. And that's the only training anybody got. They don't understand the deeper meaning of marriage, the purpose. Why is it male and female?
Hey everyone, this is Yvette Hampton. Welcome back to the Schoolhouse Rock podcast. I am so excited about this week. We have been praying and waiting for this week for months and months. Abby and I have been talking about this episode for so long, and we have Morgan Ferrer back with us this week. She was with us a couple months ago. We talked about her book, Bear Apologetics, and this week we're going to talk about Bear Apologetics, Guide to Sexuality. And the reason that we're doing this, and we told you on the last episode that we were going to do this, the last episode we did with Hillary, because it's May, and I know June is coming up, and June, as we all know, has become Pride Month. And so we really wanted to do this episode to prepare us as parents to be able to prepare our kids on how to handle this crazy world in which we're living from a biblical perspective. And so we could think of no one better to do this with us than Hillary, and we are excited to have her back. So we're going to talk about that this week. And so get your notepads out, do whatever you need to do, start taking notes, because we're going to throw a lot of stuff at you this week. But before we do, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, BJU Press Homeschool. If you're looking for a great homeschool curriculum that has a strong biblical worldview, try them out at bjupresshomeschool.com. They will equip you for a successful homeschool journey, and they've crafted their curriculum to give you the tools that you need that are truly rooted in a strong biblical foundation. Like I said, I mean, you guys, if you use them, you know, because I've heard from a lot of you, I know that you use them and you love them. We have used them for many subjects throughout the years, and they are solid. Check them out, bjupresshomeschool.com. Well, we are back. And as you see, if you're watching the video, you see that Abinella is back with me, and we are back together with Hillary. And so the three of us are here to bring encouragement to you. So hi, Abby. It's so good to have you back again.
It's so good. I'm so excited for this one. I feel like it was right after June last year. I'm like, this idea of like, we need to have Hillary talking about this. And then we've had to wait like almost a whole year. Well, but guess what? It's not going away. It's back. Pride Month is back.
Well, you know what's funny is I remember you like shot me a text message. You and I do this all the time. You texted me, you said, I really want to talk about Pride Month next year. Right. And I want Hillary to come on to talk with us about it. And then I want to say it was like October-ish or November, somewhere around there, that I got an email from Hillary's publisher that said she had a new book called Bear Apologetics, Guide to Sexuality. And I was like, what? And this was like, I don't know.
It's like God knew.
Like the Lord just knew. And I was like, that's really weird. Right. Because Abby just said she wanted to have Hillary on to talk about these things. And so Hillary, welcome back to the podcast. We are so glad to have you back with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. For those who don't know who Morgan Ferrer is and Mama Bears, and I was like, we're going to talk about bears this week. That's what we're talking about. But for those who are not familiar with Bear Apologetics, introduce our audience to you and your ministry and what you do.
Yes, so we are Bear Apologetics, and so this name came about many years ago when I've always been interested in apologetics. Apologetics is basically giving reasons for why you believe something to be true. In our case, it would be just the Christian worldview and Jesus Christ lived, died, rose again. The Bible is trustworthy and inerrant and is authoritative for our life. So we look at Christianity just from the perspective of not only is it true, but is it good? And so we just kind of help moms have these conversations with their kids to know kind of what questions to ask, or to talk about the different worldviews that are permeating our society that are actually undermining kids' ability to have faith. Because it's really interesting how the ideas are like these little plants that grow in a soil, and every generation has a different kind of soil, and you got to know how to till that specific soil for that generation. So I would say that sexuality is one of those things that our kids are growing up just in a hyper-sexualized culture in a way that we never did. And it's really deviating from what we believe the Bible teaches on sexuality, in the sense of one man, one woman for life in marriage. All the experimentation is encouraged nowadays, and kind of that you don't knock it till you try it sort of mentality. And so kids don't understand, why does the Bible talk about this? What is the meaning behind this? Isn't this just outdated? So that was what our second book was. What does our sexuality have to do with the Christian message and with just the Christian truths and the Christian worldview in general?
Yeah, it is such an important topic for us as parents. And I think sometimes as homeschool parents, we think, well, if we keep our kids sheltered and we homeschool them and we keep them in our little bubble of Christianity and church and Awana and all the things, that they're not going to be exposed to these things.
Yeah.
And we have found
if your
that
kids
is
have a
absolutely not
computer,
true.
they will be exposed.
Yeah.
We had someone who contacted us. He's like, I thought I did everything right. My kids are homeschooled. They don't have, any of these things.
Yeah.
And then his daughter comes to him and says she thinks she's trans. And it's because she had gotten on this thread on Reddit, which Reddit is like, I don't know. They should have, sometimes I think they should have like an age filter on there, because it's like the kinds of stuff and community that comes through Reddit of just, it's pooled ignorance, shall we say, and a lot of times, but it's just people asking each other questions, and you'll see a lot of grooming actually behaviors coming through that. But I think that's how it was introduced to her.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's absolutely heartbreaking. So we do need to help our kids understand God's design for gender and sex and marriage and family and all the things, all the reasons why God made humans, why he made mankind and how he made us to work together as men and as women. So let's kind of jump off with that question. How do we, first, because we can't teach it to our kids until we understand it as their parents, how do we understand God's design for this? Because I feel like it's not just the kids. I feel like so many Christians today, adult Christians, or at least those who claim to be believers, are like, well, I'm not so sure about, the LGBTQ community, and I'm not so sure about this. Or, it seems like everyone now has a family member who is in this world, and it's really hard to know, how do we love them? How do we navigate through this? And we're going to talk about that too. But the first question would be like, how do we as people, as adults, understand God's design for these things?
Yeah. So when we're when Amy and I speak at conferences, a lot of times we just ask, what are some of the things that you've heard about? What did you hear about sex when you were growing up? And basically the answer is like, just don't do it, or don't do it till marriage. And that's the only training anybody got. They don't understand the deeper meaning of marriage, the purpose. Why is it male and female? And one of the things I became very, very convinced of back when I was in my biology master's program is that everything in the physical realm has a spiritual parallel. And God uses things of this earth as just, I kind of say it's like a giant finger pointing to God, saying, hey, look over there. But we as humans kind of like, I don't know if you've ever tried to point something out to your dog and you're like, look over at the ball. And he's like sitting there staring at your finger. That's kind of what we do. The things that are meant to point to God, we actually look at those things instead of the direction that they're pointing. Paul talks about how marriage, it's supposed to be this divine mystery of the church and of Christ. And I think Rachel Gilson, who wrote a really amazing book called Born Again This Way, she was a same-sex attracted Christian. And this is what she said theologically. When God speaks of himself and his people being married, God is always the male and his people are always the female. Why does sex difference matter for the metaphor? First, the relationship by definition can't exist without both parties. So if you lack one of the parties, you destroy the picture, lose the male from the marriage, and you lose the picture of Christ. Lose the female, and you lose the picture of the church. Second, the members are not interchangeable. Christ is not the church, and the church is not Christ. Third, the male and female are different from one another, yet able to be united because of shared humanity. So too, God and his people are essentially vastly different. The gospel is about an uncrossable chasm, shockingly bridged.
Wow.
So I just think that is one of the most powerful statements that I've heard, that when I talk with youth, I ask them about, like, say, some of your sports, your sports people, say that you were playing your sport and you knew that a scout was coming out to watch you to see if they wanted you for a college scholarship. If someone else put on your jersey and then played horribly, how would you feel? They're all like, all the guys are like, I'd go fight them, I'd beat them up. Or if you had something like, hey, what about you? You're trying to get into art college, and someone comes and they put your name on all of their art pieces, and the art pieces, are completely different than anything you would create. How would you feel about that? And, people say, oh, well, that's not properly representing me. And I'm like, God has said that the marriage relationship, that sexuality itself is supposed to be a picture of himself and the church. Basically, if we mess up this picture, we are messing up God's image to the world. And so, I mean, if we can picture that on something as silly as trying to get a football scholarship, we should be able to compare that to something as important as understanding the God of the universe. Now, we don't know exactly which parts of the analogy are like one for one, but that's the thing with analogies. Not everything is one for one. But it's a picture. It's supposed to give you this idea. And I just love the way Rachel says, an uncrossable chasm shockingly bridged. When we talk about male and female together, I mean, it's just a wonder for all of us how we make this work, right? Like that you have male and female that are so different from one another.
Right.
My husband and I even have a conference coming up where they've asked us to talk about how to translate things into your spouse's language, because just the way we talk a lot of times, my husband and I will be like, I'll phrase it in terms of my values. He'll phrase it in terms of his values. And neither of us understand what they're saying because we're so different. But that is one of the pictures that we get through male and female. And we can't get rid of that. We also see in Genesis 1 where it talks about in our image, we created them male and female. He created them. So there is something about God's image that is manifest in these two different genders. Now, what exactly are those? We don't know, but we know that there's a picture there and that there's things that we can't understand about the gospel and about God unless we have reverence for that picture that's supposed to be pointing to him. And that's why I titled chapter 2 in this one, or was it chapter 3, A Really Great Design When Followed. This works really well to give you a picture of what Christ is like. I always say, my dad helps me understand God the Father better. And my husband helps me understand Christ with the way they have treated me, the way that they have exercised authority in our family. That I feel like I get a better picture of who God is through that relationship. So when we just mess all that parts of the relationship, then we really mess up the image of God.
Yeah. Wow.
It hits me because I think so much of this earth, we try to make everything about us, right? About us and how I want to identify and how I want to feel. And it's so amazing when you say that. It's like, again, it's the answer to everything. It's not about us. It's never been about us. It's about God. And that whole example you just gave really points back to that. Even marriage, even our sexual identity, it all is about God, not us.
Yeah, there's this sanctifying influence that when, you think you're a pretty normal person, you don't have a lot of needs and stuff till you get married, then all of a sudden you realize, oh, wow, I'm a lot more high maintenance than I thought. My husband used to think he was fine. He didn't realize he didn't know how to articulate his thoughts and his feelings because none of his guys were ever asking him or trying to understand. So it's like there's this sanctifying thing that comes in relationship. And then, of course, you have kids and it's this whole other level of dying to self. That you never expected. But I mean, that's part of the beauty of marriage and family is the way that God progresses us through that sanctification process.
Totally.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. We want to thank all our sponsors for making this show possible. BJU Press Homeschool, CTC Math, and Apologia. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this. Visit the show notes for links to these great companies and thank them for supporting the Schoolhouse Rock podcast. We are back with Hillary. Can I just tell you guys, it's so funny as you listen to this podcast, what you might not realize is that we take breaks. When we take a commercial break, we actually take a break and we talk with each other in the break. And it's always so funny, the conversations that come up. So I don't even know what we were talking about in the break, but we all ended up with giggles. And I'm like, okay, straight face. We got to get serious now. Everyone just calm down.
Get focused.
We've got to get back into this. But anyway, before the break, we were talking, just about, how we as adults, as Christians can understand God's design for gender and sex, which by the way, I happen to know, because this was in your bio, Hillary, that you hold a master's degree in biology.
I do.
So you actually know a thing or two about biology, right?
So you know the difference between male and female? Like
actually, if someone asked me to define what a woman is, I could do it. It's amazing.
So this is actually biological. It's incredible.
Yes.
We trust you.
Yeah. If your reproductive system is geared around creating eggs, then you're a female. If it's geared around creating sperm, then you're a male.
And God designed it that way. Amen.
And they need each other in order to create new life, in order for two to become one. That's what you have. Egg plus sperm, it's literally two becoming one. Like I said, there's always a parallel. The physical realm gives us a picture of what's going on.
I love that. Okay, so you said earlier something about like, so ideas are like little baby plants and each generation has a different soil, right? And I was thinking about this because my dad was here last week and we were just talking about the culture and what's going on with this whole thing. And he's like, back in my day, this is what we did with these situations. And I was like, well, that's also sin. And then we were just talking about like each different generation and how this whole thing of sexuality has gone through. And I think, it started out where people were being very unloving and bashing and it wasn't a good situation.
Yeah.
And then it moved into my generation and yours probably was like, we need to tolerate everything, right? It's the tolerance. And then we moved from tolerance to we all need to accept it. And then from there, what I've noticed is just recently, it's been, we don't tolerate, we don't accept, you have to actually experience it. Like this generation is one of those that's like, you can't bash it till you try it. You can't have an opinion unless you've actually gone and lived as the other, right? And now what I'm noticing is this new soil is there is no one or the other. There is no male, there is no female, it's all just this big whitewashed thing.
Yeah.
And so I want to ask you, because like these are all different, each generation, the enemy has used different tactics to try to confuse us, to try to steal what God designed, to try to lie to us, right? He's the prince of lies. And so there's all these different tactics being used to trick children into adopting an unbiblical view of sexuality. And they're it's kind of all under the same umbrella. The devil wants to deceive and try to take what God designed. So what I've noticed, and it kind of goes with your other book that I just loved, is this linguistic theft tactic, right?
Yeah.
Where we're taking, now we see this new generation, they're taking all these words that God created, like love, tolerance, justice, and they're using that in this war. And will you just kind of hit on that tactic a little bit and help parents see it and understand it and know what to do with it?
Yeah, so a lot of times, like you were saying, like what was done in the past was very sinful. The way any kind of sexual sin was almost othered. In fact, I go through this a lot in the same-sex attraction chapter, where I talk about the unforgivable sin at every generation. That it started out with, as long as you weren't divorced, I mean, he could be beating his wife, and but as long as they weren't divorced, they could still come to the country club. And then it was as long as there was no pregnancy out of wedlock, they can do whatever they want in the back seat of the car, but as long as there's no pregnancy, well, then pastors started recognizing, oh, well, maybe now that we have abortion, that's where the babies are going. And so then they started ministries to reach out to single mothers. And then it turned into basically you could sleep around with as many people as you wanted, but as long as you ain't gay, then everything's fine. It's like we keep pushing it a little bit further of what is the unforgivable sin. And it's almost like in this generation, the unforgivable sin is there being any unforgivable, is the concept that I call anything sin.
Sin, that's so
that is
true.
the unforgivable sin. And so it's like you take some of these abuses from the past and then you transport them back into the present and say, we need to avoid all this hurt and harm that's been done. And granted, there is still a lot of hurt and harm that can be done in the name of Christ when it comes to sexual sins. But what kids are being told now is that it is loving in order to love. You not only have to, kind of like you were saying, not only have to tolerate, not only embrace, but you need to not only experience, but you also need to promote.
Right.
This aspect of sexuality. And if you don't do that, well, then you are the reason that kids are committing suicide, and your God says to love. So why aren't you loving like Jesus loved? And of course, these kids are going, I do want to love like Jesus loved. And so people say, well, why do you hate me so much? Why are you harming me? The words that you're saying bring harm to me. Jesus said, don't harm. Why are you doing this? If you truly love like Jesus did, you wouldn't say those things. You wouldn't believe those things. You wouldn't even think those things. We've got thought police that are going on now that if you even think that kind of things, you need to be deprogrammed.
And the thing you're talking about is that what that person is doing is sin, right? These things right.
Basically a sexuality that's outside of male and female marriage. And so
exactly.
Sorry if I was not clear enough with that. In fact, there's something they have a word for it. It's called sex negativity. Sex positivity is where you find that you are willing to embrace, and you don't even have an inner cringe for anybody's sexual choices. If you have any kind of inner cringe for anything, that's being sex negative, and you basically need to deprogram yourself from that. So it's like these kids that are trying to get a no flinch for anything sexual that goes on, and they think that in order to love like Jesus loved, which it's this beautiful spirit of compassion and love that is guiding them and directing them towards this, but it's being channeled in a wrong way. So it's like this is where they are legitimately being tricked into affirming a non-biblical point of view because they say, well, God said that the greatest of these is love. So that trumps everything else.
Yeah. I definitely want to kind of stay on this page of love and how do we love those who are struggling with this sin? Because that's a big question that everybody asks. I said, there are many of us, I would say a large majority of us for sure have someone in our family, like our, very close family who is struggling in the area of homosexuality or, LGBTQIA, blah, 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 all the letters. And so then comes the question, how do we love these people enough to not accept and affirm their sin, but still love them as Jesus loves them? So I do want to talk about that, but we're out of time. So we're going to come back on Wednesday and discuss that. Hillary, tell us where we can find the book. Mama Bear Apologetics Guide to Sexuality is the name of the book, and your podcast and all things Hillary Morgan Ferrer.
Well, all things Mama Bear will be at www.mamabearapologetics.com, and that's spelled M-A-M-A, not any of the other ways. So you can go there. You can go to basically anywhere books are sold. You can go to Amazon, I believe Target. That's ironic, isn't it? I think Target, they don't carry it in store, but I'm pretty sure they do online.
Yeah.
I think Walmart, basically any Christian bookstore will usually have it. But, Amazon, don't we all just kind of shop from Amazon?
Yeah.
So local Christian bookstores or Amazon, you can find those there. Our podcast, Mama Bear Apologetics podcast. And then we also have, blogs. And we have a couple of blogs that are specifically about like breaking down all the different messages you're going to be hearing during Pride Month and saying, here's what the message is, here's, what they're trying to say, here's where they got it wrong, here's where you can now have conversations with your kids about this.
We'll put those links in the show notes. Your blog is fantastic. I don't read a lot of blogs. I listen to more podcasts and I listen to your podcast, but I get your emails. And so, oftentimes your blogs will come out. You just had one come out not that long ago on yoga and, the Christian stance on yoga. And I was like, yes, I'm so glad that they're addressing this.
Honestly, I don't read a lot of the emails that come through either, but yours I always do because I feel like I gain something every time.
That makes me feel so good. Yeah.
Oh
it's
my
like
gosh.
We're always kicking ourselves for not sending them out more, but we try to make it to where we're not just sending them to send them. Like if there's something we're like, hey, you might want to look at this.
And then I print them off and I read them to my kids like it's in first person, like I'm actually teaching them, but really I'm just reading what you say.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
Yeah, you have an amazing
Mom,
team there.
You're so smart. You've just been everywhere. How do you do it? And you're like, I know, sweetie. I know.
And then you apologize because it's from Mama Bear Apologetics, right? So you always have to end with an apology. Just kidding.
That's right.
That's not what apologetics is. Anyway. Hillary, thank you for being with us. We will be back on Wednesday. If you guys have not watched the movie Schoolhouse Rocked: The Homeschool Revolution, you can stream it for free. You know this because I tell you this pretty much every week, but still so many of you haven't seen it. And we continue to get comments and reviews from people just telling us what an impact it's had on them. And so if you haven't seen it, go to our website, schoolhouserocked.com, where you can do all kinds of things. You can leave, you can make a donation to the ministry, you can watch the movie, you can read our blog posts there. We don't have as many as Mama Bear Apologetics, but we have some good ones on there. And we have lots of stuff on there. So go to our website, schoolhouserocked.com. Have a great rest of your day. Stay tuned at the very end to hear what's coming up next on the podcast. And we will see you back here on Wednesday. Bye.
Education is discipleship, and this is something I didn't understand until I was probably 3 years into homeschooling. The Bible teaches us in Luke 6:40 that when a student is fully trained, he will be like his teacher. And as we look around the culture right now, I think it begs the question, who is teaching our children? Who is teaching our children, and what are they teaching our children? And to me, the primary benefit of having my children home with me is I am able to impart my worldview to my children.
Kids can get kind of confused about, well, which kind of human? So you can ask, what about that man over there? Is he made in the image of God? Yes. What about that puppy down there? Nope. Adorable as he is, not made in the image of God. What about that flower over there? Beautiful, but not made in the image of God. What about that homeless man in a wheelchair? And yes, still made in the image of God. What about that man dressed like a clown? And you'd be surprised. Some kids are like, well, God's not a clown, so can he be made? So you're establishing this no matter how they appear, no matter how differently abled they are, no matter what color they are, no matter what their hair looks like, no matter if they're like even in their right mind or not. They are all made in the image of God. What about that pregnant woman over there? Yes, made in the image of God. What about the baby inside of her? Yes, made in the image of God. And so once you get this idea of, grass, trees, puppies, kittens, otters, all of those adorable things, cute as they are, not made in the image of God, then we say, and how do we treat people made in the image of God? Well, with dignity and respect, with kindness. And so we are establishing made in the image of God. This is how we treat them. And now we're going to move to the next step of being made in the image of God. And this is where it's a little more difficult, to actions that reflect the image of God.